Hi there. In this video we're going to talk about the External Tools tab and how we can use external tools with Splat Pro and then give a sort of consistent pipeline all the way through to the end. So if I launch the program, while we're here in the sort of root folder of the software, there's a couple of folders that are relevant to this. One is the scripts folder. So you can place scripts here. You could put the full path to it, but these are ones that are bundled with it. So one, for example, is this one, and this is used for sometimes when Colmap is running, it can create multiple models, and this was used as a little workflow step just to select the best or the largest of the sparse clouds, because sometimes I was getting a small one and then a large one on the second attempt. So that script would live here. So here's the external tab. Oh, sorry, one more thing. There's also a config folder here, and this is super useful for when you're exporting and using Reality Scan and you want to use an XML config file for the dialog box. So you can run it as a batch command, but when you did the same command within the software, a little dialog pops up. You can save that dialog and then use that for essentially the parameters which you're going to run. So those are the sort of two folders that are involved with external workflow folders tab. And we're going to be using the Park Road demo file that you can download with the tool, just in case you want to follow along. This one's been extracted. What I'm going to do is, sort of while I'm talking about the external thing, I'm going to do a smaller set of files. So I'm just going to switch to our 360 video ready one. I'm not going to run the align now, so I can turn this off, and we're going to just set it down to 10 frames. So this will just extract 10 frames and run the masking, and that's it. So I'll just hit batch all here, and then that'll be running the files out through there. Okay, so GUI wise, there's one thing you have to do before you can use any of the external tools, and that's to add them to this tool. The way you do that is in the advanced tab or advanced section. You can see I've already set up quite a few here. Something that's really useful is you can just launch the tool with a little green play button. Once it's set up, that goes there. And what's going on there? Close it. To add a new tool, you just got a little button here. Press that. You browse to the tool, or you can just paste the path in, and then you can give it a name, and that's the name that appears here. So I've actually got a Reality Scan delete that I was just trying, so let me just remove that. And that's how you remove them. There's this little one here. So there's also tokens, which is a way I'm using to shorten the amount of information you have to put in. So if you want, and it's all relative to that particular project. So this shows you when you have the project loaded that if I use, say, project, that's going to resolve to this folder structure here. So it's a way of giving you shortcuts to those locations. Same thing if I wanted to use masks, I can use that as well. In the workflows menu, I've actually got some external ones here. So if I just picked train, that's just got brush and it's one external cue, etc. When you first launch, you'll notice nothing is here. And so you can just hit plus if you wanted to start one from scratch, and then you can pick, there's lots of shortcuts in here for them. So essentially, like that align is what is in that workflow there. If I was on all of them off, hit plus, then you're not using that particular workflow. But the other thing in the GUI which is useful here is, say I modify something, I don't know, in any of these commands, I actually want to set this to 0.5 or something, you'll notice this switches to custom. And so basically that's telling you it's not the preset anymore and that you've changed something here, but it's not saved either. So if you wanted to save this to a custom preset, you can hit plus here. Say I call this my brush settings, works for you, for your hardware, all of that kind of thing. You can save that, and then that will appear very at the end where you put them in. So if you wanted to share that with someone else, you can just do an export preset, and I think that should contain everything that's here, and then they can load them up. So that's another useful way of, if you could hit plus again. Okay, yeah. So if I'm gonna change those settings again and I hit plus, it's going to overwrite your brush settings. I can save it as a new, say my brush settings 2 or something like that as well. But that's super useful just to keep, so you don't end up with hundreds of those things all sort of put in there. Now you can see it just kind of go a little bit through here. Got the tool listed here. Again, so if you're setting up some scratch, you could pick the tool if you wanted to. The output, basically that's under the external folder, and then it would create a brush safe folder here. So when you go to open folder, it's just going to go to the external folder, because those could all be new folders created, they may not be created. It was tricky to keep track of all that. Input, so if we're using like the align tab, it actually shows you where that input's coming from. So that's that's the output, and the input here is going to pick the cubic folder. So this is assuming we would align them as sphere SFM. Now these will work out of the box, but this is more for when you're creating your own custom workflows, and obviously it's a bit more advanced, but I think it's super powerful in order to be able to batch process multiple files rather than having to run them one at a time, etc. So let's put this into action a little bit, and I'll kind of take you through. What I'm going to do is just delete this frame split folder. In this particular workflow, instead of using a line, we're going to go to the older method we used to do with the old tool, where because Sphere SFM is aligning the extracted frames, which were the lat long images, they're not overlapping. And this method will split the extracted frames into tiles with an overlap. So you can see, like, as I change this overlap, that's with none, and so these red lines are kind of going over there. Usually I find like 70% was kind of working the best, or maybe 75. I'll put this to 70, and then you can export masks as well. You've got different settings for all of that. I can do a separate video just on the splitting if there's demand for it, but I hardly ever use this method now. Anyway, so if I run this will create a frame split folder, and those users of the old tool will be familiar with this, and it's basically doing that extraction, and then you can run that through Reality Scan or a normal photogrammetry piece of software. However, the Sphere SFM method is preferred because the alignments for the entire image, whereas this can get misalignments between these overlapping frames based on the amount of features available in that overlap. Okay, so those are extracted. If I picked, say, I want to do a Reality Scan align, I can pick that, and going back to the GUI a little bit, you can actually disable these as well. So you don't have to have all of them on. If I ran this with, extract mask, etc. on, nothing will happen here because these aren't activated. So it's important to know you can activate and deactivate them. You can run them individually with run selected, and you can run all, which won't run anything else outside of here, or you can run batch all, which will run all of the activated workflow steps here. So in this particular case, if I ran this, I'll run it, show you what this will do. This will launch Reality Scan, import those images, and then start trying to align them. However, what this is trying to do is the input is coming from frames. And there's two ways you can fix this. So what it's tried to do is align the extracted frames rather than the split images, and that Reality Scan's just not set up to do that. You can see when it's run, it will say step 1 and 1. If I was running more than one step that was activated, because I was just running selected, then you'll see each step listed in the console here. So that's kind of useful for debugging and then seeing what might have broken or anything like that. So in this particular case, we can change the input path to use splits, and then you'll see the path here is shifted. So if I run it again, it's going to overwrite the file. I run selected here. So it's just running this extraction. Now this might break it a little bit in that it's opened that file up. So there's 2 sets of data in there. This says it's completed. Let's just go down here and launch anti-scan. So that may be a bug, or it may be because the file was already there. So what I'll do is just go to my project folder, go to external, and you see the RS aligned files here. So what I'm going to do is just delete this and then run it again, and then just check that okay, sorry, that didn't get changed to splits. Did I change it there? Yes, sorry. So I changed the export. Is using the input folder, but the export shouldn't really matter too much with that. But this should be set to splits. So if I run this now, it was still good to delete it because it already had those frames there. Now you see you've got a lot more frames because they're all of the split frames, and this is going to run an alignment on that. And this was kind of the old method, but really once I discovered the full frame alignment, the cube map export was perfect using Sphere SFM, because essentially it's splitting the lat long image into a cubic map where off post alignment. So then you wouldn't get any issues with the alignment in the cube maps being off in that method, which came after splits. So if I load this up now, you'll see there's a lot more overlap between the frames, but what you actually get is this sort of not quite a cube map. You can see they're slightly misaligned from each other, and this is just down to features really. You get better versions of this, but they would never be perfectly, and sometimes you get the odd stray one, stuff like that. So that's why this method isn't really recommended for 360 stills or video, because of the splitting alignment. Now maybe you'd run into memory issues or some other methods like that. Feel free to put on the Discord any questions about this. Now, if I wanted to manually change this, so if I'm back on this one again, and say this was on frames, what I could do is say, okay, what do I need from here? Oh, I need the splits group, or token, however we want to call it, and then I can actually even change it. Add folder. So input, what's that going to pick? Okay, so input, if it's set to input in the command, it will use whatever you set in the dropdown. But you can force it to use the splits folder or something like that if you wanted to. So instead of input here, if I put splits, then you'll see the path that it will import the images from, the add folder command the reality scanner is using, is going to use the frame split folder. So if it's set to input, it's going to use whatever the GUI is set to. But you can force it to always use splits or something like that if that's what you wanted to, rather than having to change it there. But once it's set, it's then essentially transferable to any project, and it'll work because all the project structure is the same. And yeah, you can reorder these as well. I think I'll turn those both on. I'll try and remember if I did that. Actually, let's pick something. So the Colmap fisheye has got a lot of steps in it. So if I move this up, we can see everything. And then you can see essentially each one of these is a container for this, but you can have your own custom ones in there as well. So you could have, your sweet spot lift field settings for certain types of data. You can have those there on hand and then just pick them straight away without having to take them from a list or anything like that. And then some of these are using Python, because we're using a colmap command, that kind of thing. So yeah, overall, I think it's pretty powerful, and I think users are going to be able to create custom workflows that they can then share in terms of this export preset. And so that acts as it creates this .360sp file, and that can act as a template for someone else to use, so you can share workflows and generally extend the tool beyond the sort of single use cases that we have at the moment. And there's a few others in there that are quite useful. So one, I was trying to do just the non-undistorted lift field, so going direct to it, so it's using the distorted images. And yeah, there's a few experiments in there and stuff like that, but I think it's really useful and something to get into and test out, especially if you're using your own command lines and that kind of thing. I don't want to overwhelm the user from the outset for if they're new to splatting and that kind of thing, but for those who've been doing it a while, I think you'll hopefully really enjoy this working methodology and the sort of speed. And because once you've done this, I can add in 5 projects along here and then just batch process all of them. So I think there's a quite powerful ability to, you come back from a big shoot, you've got loads of data to get through, and then I think this tool is really going to extend that workflow. So I hope that's been useful. Have a look on Discord and ask any questions that might be confusing. Thanks very much.